I just realized, Owen, I didn't even put up your modesty shield.
Eh,
So it's kind of like, ta-da, here we are. It's ThursdAGE. It's been a minute.
it's been a day.
It's
I've
been
slept since then.
good. Good, 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 good. But we're back doing some stuff. I'm worried that I'm loud and you're quiet, so I'm going to jump you up a level. Hey, look, everybody is joining. Good deal. Hello, everybody. We have sound and vision. Thank you.
It's amazing how important these little hurdles can be to get over.
Exactly.
Can you see us and hear us? When?
We've done it. Apologies for the background music. It's not quite the sort of rousing, exciting kind of stuff that I like to lead in with. It's more the slow and sleepy. Hey, it's Jonesy, Brian F. Irving. Good to see you. Welcome.
Yeah, but it's good for ridiculously grooving out on things. So
That's true. Yeah, it's just got a vibe. Okay, it's got a vibe.
We're going to be pretty low energy today, and this is our proof.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're just gonna chill. It's ThursdAGE. We're hanging out with friends. I do feel like I'm not a big marijuana smoker. I just don't smoke it. I don't do really well on it. When I smoke it, I end up like needing to do everybody's taxes and asking when the last time you called your mom. And yeah, it does kind of have a '70s beat to it, don't it, Jonesy? But this music is making me feel like I'm stoned.
Well, this is the soundtrack for being stoned, quite clearly.
It is indeed. It is indeed. Well, Owen, today, how about I just go ahead and cork it? It's time to chill. Yeah, you know what? I purposefully, Owen, decided, you know, I wasn't going to entertain. We do a big holiday, extravaganza. Though people will get enough of that. We are presents in ourselves. Stan says we're getting our groove on. Nice.
Yeah, some of us are old enough to remember when that music was actually, common.
That's right. Yeah. I just feel like we might be shopping at a mall in maybe the,
I don't think anyone
early.
does that anymore, Troy.
I don't think so. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe like circa 90, 89, 90.
I not too long ago, I was posting random thoughts about a fantasy history timeline, and someone noted, okay, but with this timeline, that means that some of your ancient empires would still be around when current elves were alive. So you should expand your timeline by thousands of years so the elves can die. And I realized that you can do that, but the other option is to just say, yeah, there are elves that remember that, and they tend to just look at people and roll their eyes and say, I remember when. And that's a little like being a certain age of a gamer now, right? Like I work with people for whom the Soviet Union is exclusively a historical mention.
That's right. Yeah.
It was this vast evil empire, and it was the existential threat that was most likely to end my life, and they had vast and uncontrolled powers, and it one weekend it just all went away.
That's right.
And
It was just like that. Yeah.
I literally my weekend activity that weekend was watching Stan Brown. Who would suggest such a thing to you? Yes, it was Stan. Um, my weekend activity that weekend was sitting in front of, I'm pretty sure, CNN, watching the Soviet Union unravel. With popcorn. And if you start thinking about some of the older races that way, right? Things are changing so fast now that we have these generational gaps. And you can take that same concept and put it in a fantasy setting. Like if you have elves that are older than magic, right? There didn't used to be mages, or there are specific arcana that did not exist. Oh, the Fate Arcana, everyone thinks the Fate Arcana is so great. When I was learning magic, we didn't have access to the Fate Arcana. No one had figured out how to manipulate fate. That's like being someone today and someone saying, well, why didn't you just look that up on Google? Hey, look, when I was coming up, we didn't have the internet.
That's
This
right.
this
Yeah. Yeah.
this vast society changing thing didn't, and I've adapted to it, sure, but that wasn't an option for us.
Right.
And I think that's actually, not only is it, for me at least, more interesting, that you can have the ages of those different species actually impact real-time characters. I also think that there are probably some people in their 50s and 60s and even 70s who might enjoy getting to be the curmudgeonly dwarf who's like, steel. I remember when all we had was iron and no one had to make steel. Uh, my smithing instructor taught me how to make bronze, and that is exactly the way when I'm talking to my wife about layout, and she's saying, we used to literally put wax on the end of pieces of paper and move the wax board around, and then we'd take a picture of it, and that's what would get printed. And you didn't use computers for anything. Um,
Right.
it's there are people that have those moments in their lifetimes, and I think that would make for a interesting option in a setting, and you can do it without changing anything. That iron, we used to dream of iron. You can do it without changing anything about your current game, right? It's a super simple thing to do. You can say, hey, if your character's 100 or more years old, there weren't mages when they were coming up, or these specific arcana didn't exist, or no one had invented the crossbow yet. These things just didn't exist. They're all here now. All the player characters have access to them, but if you want to have a timeline of stuff that wasn't around, here it is. And so if you're playing an elf or a dwarf, or if you're playing a bunny centaur with a 5-century lifespan, here are the things that you can mention weren't around when you were a kid.
That's very interesting. I think it just also opens up a whole world of like what happens, or a what if kind of scenario. Like, what if this thing didn't happen, or this vital
Yeah.
metal or whatever, and what would it look like? And one day you wake up and you're with your party, and your sword is made out of marshmallows.
All right. Now I admit it. I would normally claim that swords made out of marshmallows would be ridiculous, but um, at the same time, it's the Christmas season,
That's
so
right.
I
Yeah.
I would be all right. So Stan says he'd love to debate this with me, and that's beginning to sound like a show that we might do sometime. So he says that some changes beliefs fall apart when there are people who were there for the thing that the world has lost. And he says that, and I get what he's saying, but that works on the assumption that facts and eyewitnesses and people who can say, I have proof of this thing, will convince a society of a truth. And I think the other thing that we've seen in our world right now is as long as there's somebody who benefits from saying that's not the case, right?
It
Like
will be
if
said. Yeah.
if we establish, hey, if you're an elf or a dwarf, I will slip you a card to tell you whether or not the Ben and Jerry Empire actually existed. But if you're human, you don't get to know because you weren't there. And certainly there are humans who are constantly saying that there was no Ben and Jerry Empire and the Ben and Jerryans don't exist. And yeah, someone mentions to Stan, it's astonishing how easily people can deny the evidence presented to them. Um, we also have other options, right? Magic is a thing in a lot of these settings, so we can perfectly well say, look, uh, here's our Atlantis. We'll call it Belantis just for simplicity's sake, because Atlantis is already taken. There was this great empire of Belantis, but it was so powerful that it got time manipulation magic, and so depending on when you were born, Belantis may or may not have ever existed when you were growing up and learning history, because it existed, and then people went back in time and made sure it never existed, and then people went back in time and made sure it existed again. So there are tons of options, which can be fun world building, where you can say, here's your character has a 25, yeah, Chris says the world is flat, or Rome didn't exist, or there are people that believe that right now in our world, there are people that claim that Australia is not real.
That's right. Yep.
And
Yep.
and I don't mean 3 or 4 people. I mean there are entire societies that talk about Australia not being real, and that's the easiest thing in the world to disprove. They can go to Australia, but yeah, you can easily have people say, well, I don't care that there are all these artifacts and all these people that claim that there's Australia, because my religion says that the great lying liar who lied to everyone 300 years ago, but since I worship the truth teller, he's told us the truth. So I'm not even saying that these people are making it up. My point is that they were lied to, and only we, the enlightened ones, know the truth. So there's lots of ways you can play that.
Absolutely. Hey,
Using, go ahead.
go ahead. I was just going to say, what is there a danger when you can start to kind of get into this? It's adjacent to, words that I won't even mention, groups that are formed currently to, around sort of a weird false narrative that, like, how much of that do you want to incorporate into your hobby, role play?
So that's a really great question, and the answer is, as with most great questions, it depends, and it varies, which are related but separate answers. So for your home game, whatever you and your players are comfortable with and okay with, and allows you to have fun and doesn't uh, press a finger on anyone's scars of old trauma, use some safety tools, have a conversation in advance, um, and try to make sure that you are sensitive about the fact that you want to have a feedback mechanism where people don't feel like they are ruining other people's fun to say a thing is not fun for them. I have some real world trauma in my life going all the way back to my childhood, and there are real world things that people do that are evil and terrible and villainous that I have had game masters decide, okay, as shorthand for describing how evil and terrible and villainous this person is, he'll be involved in this activity. And the game master has no way of knowing that that activity is something that has impinged my real life and my history. And it can be really uncomfortable if that is a reveal and you're sitting at the gaming table and you sort of get a knot in the pit of your stomach, and now people are possibly even making jokes about this thing because we're all having a good time and you want to tell puns, and there are, Ghostbusters and Monty Python quotes about it, and you don't want to have to be the one to stand at that moment when everyone's having fun and saying, hey, this is not cool for me. So if anything is likely to touch, is Owen facing in a different direction? Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. I am, because you can see the giant Winchester gun safe behind me. So there are many mechanisms for it, and I don't want to recommend one over the other right now. And again, we might, but so there's that level of stuff. The next one is something going to feel too forced or cheesy?
Is it fun? Is it fun?
And that's again going to vary by group. Like I have played in fantasy games. I'm playing in one right now, Valiant, run by Luis Loza through the No Direction Network, where it is a fantasy setting, but we have borrowed a lot of the tropes of the Old West. So we've got 10-gallon hats and kerchiefs, and the characters, instead of riding horses, are riding axe beaks and giant praying mantises. But it is all very much borrowing from the ideas of Old West settings, and that was part of the pitch to us for that adventure, for that whole setting, and we were all into it. But at the same time, I could see someone saying, "Look, if I know where 10-gallon hats come from, and I understand how different real world socio-political pressures created things like land barons and railways and cattle drives, and if those aren't present, this is all going to strike me weird." Or for that matter, I've got a friend who just names can bug him, right? Like if you've got a major king who is King Bob, that is not necessarily any less logical than King Uruk, but because Bob does not sound like a fantasy name, and that can go as far as like Richard, which is a perfectly medieval name, but if your brother is named Richard and you've got a dad named Richard, when we say King Richard, you may not be thinking Robin Hood, you may be thinking uncomfortable Thanksgiving dinner. So it's worth discussing all these things, and being right is sometimes less important than meeting expectations and creating an environment where people are having a good time. Famously, there's a thing called the Tiffany effect amongst some fantasy and historical fiction writers, that there are a lot of people for whom the name Tiffany feels super Valley Girl and modern, but it's older than that. So if you use this perfectly appropriate name, Tiffany, for a setting where there's no reason it wouldn't be around, there may well be people who roll their eyes and can't get into the setting as a result. I like to make when I'm doing things that are inspired by real world events, I like to try and not make them super one on one direct analogs, right? Like, I do not want to have a group of heralds who are working for a were orange and are spreading lies, and their symbol is a fox, right? That is super on the nose. It is trying to make a political point with my game, and if you want to make a political point with your game, feel free. Be aware that some people won't appreciate that point. But for me, part of the fun of a fantasy role playing game, of any role playing game, is the escapism. So it's the same reason that, like, there are games out there where what you do is play people who are trying to scrape up enough money to pay the bills and cover one healing potion and save their Aunt May from dying. And those aren't fun for me because I spend enough time doing my taxes and figuring out my
Right.
budget and trying to scrape up money. And that is not to say that there's anything wrong with that gaming. I think if people enjoy that, that is a super reasonable activity to have fun with. When I lived in Seattle, I spent a fair amount of time at the AFK Tavern and AFK Elixirs and Eateries, and got to know the owners and investors and some of the staff. And one of the games they had was a sort of Firefly inspired small independent merchant starship, which was mostly a game about resource management. And so they would spend entire game sessions on spreadsheets and profit margins and
Oh,
figuring out where their capital up, and they had fun with that. And I suspect part of the reason is that these were things that were constantly in their mind because they were running real businesses. And this was an opportunity to sort of unlimber those skills without the weight of, and if we get it wrong, people's real livelihoods will be ruined and the business will go bankrupt.
one of the things too I want to add real quick, before we get too far afield, Brian said a couple of really interesting things, and one of them being that it is difficult for people, I think, to that you can see something and just think, oh, this is you're inspired by this or that, and it could actually not be at all, as Brian also shared that you know 25 years ago wrote a fantasy setting where one of the core themes looks like an allegory for Brexit. But
Yep.
and if you're seeing it for the first time, yeah. But that is sort of a testament to the notion. Thanks, Chris says, what a great topic. But the uh, for me, even stepping back a bit, I always have been looking, and I think this is just from my vantage point. I see what can we do as people who feed ourselves and pay for our homes and all the things that we need to survive by working in this business. How are we um, bringing new people in? And so from my perspective, when I was asking that question, I thought, gosh, would that even be fun? And part of that is that I don't know, in the context of new people coming and embracing a product, friends getting together and kind of doing that thing, you still want to check, and you want to check boundaries
Yeah,
and all that
totally.
stuff. But I do wonder about, if a person just kind of popped in for the first time to learn something about, what's ThursdAGE and the adventure game engine and all this stuff. And this Owen KC Stephens is brilliant. And Matt Troy, he's a real disembodied guy. I it just struck me that, is this environment, or are we, or should we do more to make this environment welcoming to new folks?
Yeah, I mean that's part of the trick of trying to have any entertainment activity
Yeah.
be a business. And it's the same problem that people get in with movies and television shows and books. um, and you can see debates about whether uh, some activity was necessary to establish the theme of a
Oh
show
yeah.
or a game or anything. Like, there's a website called Does the Dog Die? And it is literally a place where you can go, you can enter the name of a movie, and the first thing it will tell you is, does a dog die in this movie? Because There are people for whom, if the animal dies, if any animal dies, but especially a dog, they do not want to see that movie. They're not saying it's a bad movie necessarily, but that is a thing they don't want in their head. And I don't believe there's an equivalent for that for role playing games. So I think it's kind of important that what you put on your cover and your blurb and the title uh, give people a pretty good idea of what the tone and type of topic you're going to cover, so that if you have a product called Fluffy Bunnies and Marshmallows, you don't discover that this is all about how marshmallows are sentient, happy creatures that are being boiled alive in hot chocolate, screaming, and that's what gives the evil bunnies their power.
Yeah.
Um, if I'm sitting around with three guys around a table, and or if my wife decides to run a game and she tells us that's what's going on, and we all get a good laugh out of it because it's marshmallows and bunnies, that's fine. But you don't want to have the promise of the game to the general public not be fulfilled.
I want to.
So
I
it's
agreed. Go ahead. Sorry.
uh, fantasy age needs to have fantasy. Modern age needs to be modern.
Right.
Mutants and Masterminds both has to have the opportunity for those two groups, but also that title of that product, Mutants and Masterminds, very clearly tells you that it's a noun ampersand noun style game. And while it's actually many ways the most removed for those, it is a D20 engine, and so you can do the sort of uh, you can do the equivalent of a dungeon stomp with superheroes if you want to with that system.
So Joe Nolan dropped something in chat that I think is it. This is something that could be a very sensitive space for us to be discussing this, but we're humans, and this is what's happening right now. I I Here's my thought. Folks know me in the context of this program, really, and maybe Mutants Masterminds Monday. I have another job that is quite different, and it's really working in politics and progressive politics at that, and working on the federal level and across the nation, and it has been very interesting to have the juxtaposition of having so much fun and being able to kind of have these conversations about hobbies and then go out into the world and deal with some of the the most harrowing issues of our time, all of them, as a matter of fact. And I will tell you that when it comes to hobby fun, that kind of stuff, there's really not a lot of escape from the day of what you're dealing with, and it's a solution, it's a salve, it's all those things. um I think, and this is my take on this. I think that if you have themes of inclusivity, should be, let's not be hostile, and let's make space for people who are coming as they are to the table. Don't allow for abuse. Don't allow for thoughtless. I mean, being mindful of the kinds of people that are coming to hang out with you is just good humaning, and it is not as challenging, I think, as many people, because there's also a contingent of folks that will potentially get performative and overwrought and sort of, and it makes that uncomfortable for all people. I would encourage everybody to um, explore themes of non-hostility to the humans in the room and have fun within the game world as you learn more about the people that you're playing with, and you would naturally shift and change things unless you are a GM who's looking to just create misery for the person around you. I would suggest that hobby is not the one for you.
Yeah,
But no, I appreciate the question, and I think it's an important conversation. You know, everybody can feel comfortable playing these games. It is possible, so we should do what we can to make sure that that is, at the very least, the bare minimum, that people, the humans around the table, are feeling a part of what's happening. And sometimes that requires other additional considerations beyond, I've got a great idea, I'm going to surprise everybody with something really horrible. Like, maybe that's not as interesting as having a group fun time together.
I mean the most recent game I'm playing in, my wife opened by getting everyone together for session zero, telling us the general themes, and then she had an anonymized questionnaire where she could say things like, "Hey, are there any themes or issues that you don't want to see?" And not to be a complete list, but here's a list of things that she had found online that other people have had issues with. So I present these as possibilities, but also enter anything you want. And part of the whole point was, this was before we'd made characters. This is before the game has gone into a lot of prep. And people were able to say things like, and there are 8 players in that game, right? So this is a big group that she's running. And I don't think I could do what she's doing. But these are not all people that we've played with for 30 years, because a lot of my game groups are people that I've been playing with for 35, 36 years sometimes. And so I've got a pretty good feel for what their comfort level are. But this is a different mix of people. So she was able to put this together and ask us. And there were some things like someone said, "Hey, I'm just not comfortable with child endangerment." I don't even know who that was because they were anonymized, but I can understand that there could be a person for whom seeing a child being threatened or being damaged or being killed, even a fictional one, does not seem like a fun activity. And as it happens, the adventure has a point where you are talking to the ghost of a dead child. And so my wife just changed who that was in the circumstance. So we did not have to present this person with it is, someone asked, is it the consent and gaming questionnaire? It was based on the consent and gaming questionnaire. My wife LJ did her own research on it. But that was the starting point. Absolutely. And that has let us not have to worry about those things and focus on the things that we are all enjoying facing and working against, and trying to make a better world by opposing. And also just focus on Monty Python jokes, right? I mean, we're all fine with, hey, there are 27 guards in the room and they scream and attack you and fight to the death. Well, okay, I've been attacked. I'm defending myself. We don't have to worry about whether or not these guards have children or give to charity, or we are all comfortable with that as a fictional setting. And for the home game, I think things like questionnaires and talking to people and safety cards are great. As a publisher, you don't get the privilege of getting to talk to every person who's going to play your game. Mm-hmm. As a game master at a home game, or even if I'm running things at a convention or a store, I have this advantage. I can literally talk to everyone who's going to play the game. As a publisher, I can't do that. I can't even come close to doing that. And, we run a great big play test for ThursdAGE, which we'll be publishing next year. And if I put something in here that I am aware is problematic for a big portion of the population, then one, I am telling that portion of the population, I don't want you to play my game. I have designed a game that's not for you. And two, you kind of have to ask yourself, how do I warn people that this game is not for them, so that they know what's coming? One of the very first things I wrote for Green Ronin was a 3.0 D&D OGL book called Bastards and Bloodlines, which was about crossbreeds like half orcs and half elves, mixed ancestries, going way, way, way beyond half orcs and half elves. So we had half unicorns and half blink dogs and half dwarf, half gargoyles. And when I was pitching it, I noted that the title Bastards and Bloodlines has bastards in it, which is a harder, harsher word that some people will not want a book with that title in their library. And that one of the reasons I wanted to make that the title was that was the exact level of adult thought, mature thought I was planning to put into this book, right? That there are people with these mixed ancestries who are not necessarily considered legit or treated well by most of the societies around them. I would do that differently if I was doing that today, thank God, because if I don't improve my handling of these things after 15, 16, 17 years, that I'm not growing within my craft. Yeah. But the concept of saying this title and this cover and this marketing text should give people an idea what level of maturity and seriousness and grimness we're talking about, I think remains a good idea, even if that execution is not necessarily perfect.
Yeah, I was going to also mention, when we get talking about, inclusivity and the session zeros to explore sort of this sense of one of the things that I think might be useful for anybody who's sort of like, I'm just so tired of this conversation, or why don't people care, is step outside of the emotions of this and realize you really just, this is logistics. Do you want to play a game, or do you want to get into a game and then discover something's wrong and then have a discussion that's out of the game? And I mean, really what you're doing is the groundwork, you're investing the time so that everyone, you're managing expectations, your own as well, and then you sit around that table and then you have a uninterrupted fun time for 5 hours or more, or 5 years, or decades. But that work being done at the front doesn't have to be, do you feel pained by this? It can be, do you want to facilitate smooth sailing and get into resolve the conflicts that involve dice? Don't have to worry about bearing the weight of all of these social issues and all of that. Just get in front of it and do that work, and then it becomes something you don't have to discuss ad nauseum, because you've taken the time and left people room to tell you. And I think you'll find it's a lot easier. And many people, and the thing about it too is I know that I'm speaking to people who don't hang out with us day in day out. Whenever I mean, I know you folks, and I know that there is just a general just joy for playing, and it doesn't matter. Like, just get people around, and the table's big enough for everybody, and I appreciate that. This is really meant more for people who are like, I get it. It's exhausting to have to just continue to maintain that. But let's see. Stan says. The industry has, thank goodness, grown beyond the caveat. Yeah, it's phrase. It's wholly up to the consumer to research whether the product isn't for them. Trigger warnings and being upfront about the maturity level of a product is now more incumbent
On the publishers.
on the publishers, and that's true. And also, as publishers, we don't. I mean, there's a lot of friction between the consumer and the creator of product, but it's not one where we want to just cause pain on, surprise pain.
Well, no, and if I remember when I first picked up the Cult RPG, and that's Cult with a K, which was translated from another language, and I believe the words across the bottom were "God is dead," and I thought, well, having just picked this up, having just read the title and the tagline, I've got a pretty good idea of the level of grimdark that is going to be
Right.
in this book. And if what I am looking for is a supplement for my happy-go-lucky halflings in a dungeon stomp where we are mostly just talking about how funny it is that we literally are sometimes piling three of us up in a trench coat to reach the second level of the dungeon, this probably is not the product for me. That doesn't mean I'm saying that that's a bad product. I can it's a lot like music to me. There's some music out there that I don't enjoy. It is painful noise to me. But that is not the same as saying I don't think that music should exist. Um, Stephen Jones mentions World of Darkness. It's funny because one of the things that used that same engine as World of Darkness was the Street Fighter role playing game, and there were a lot of people who picked up the Street Fighter role playing game expecting it to be a World of Darkness take on Street Fighter. And I could see doing a blood sport fight to the death. The
Pull
whole
his
world
spine out of his body.
is yeah, the whole world is nothing but Fight Club over and over and over take on Street Fighter. But that book wasn't that. And so there were people who were, just because of who the publisher was, surprised that they took a much more, hey, it's a video game, have fun, do wushu, here's 3 cool maneuvers you can pull off. So publishers obviously want to give people a product that they will enjoy, and relatively speaking, role-playing is still a young industry. We're more and more, even the second and third wave of designers are graybeards, but it's not like novel publishing, which goes back much further, or even board games. And social forces are changing who's interested in it and who's doing it. And I get the feeling when I look at like the first edition AD&D hardback books that they did not expect 13-year-olds to be a huge market of the people that were buying that. Just the language isn't skewed at them, and yet that's the age I was when I started picking these things up, at 11 actually, when I started picking them up. And there were definitely things in there that is not in the modern age what I would put in a book that I expected an 11-year-old to pick up.
Right. Yeah, true. Very true. Yeah. And that's also, I think, what contributed to that initial sort of societal, like, oh, it's the satanic panic and D&D, and oh, they're, doing rituals for Satan or whatever. And
Well, and role playing is powerful, right? Taking
mhm.
on pretending to be a person, if it's not something that interests you, uh it can absolutely seem
Weird,
mental that
ritualistic.
people are sitting around talking about, I don't want to do this because we might die, or hey, can we summon a demon to deal with our problems. Literally, in first edition AD&D, there were evil outsiders that if you said their name, there was a percent chance they'd show up. And in one of the games I played in, the characters rounded a corner and there was a archdevil, and there was no way we could deal with him. And so we all started chanting the name of a different archdevil that was his nemesis, so that he'd appear, they would fight each other, and we could flee. But I can just imagine what that looked like to see a bunch of 13-year-olds going Demigorgon, 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 just as fast as they possibly can.
Oh,
And
that
we're
would freak
laughing
me out.
ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're laughing ourselves silly, and our characters are literally trying to summon a demon.
Well, here's the
Uh,
thing that really is frustrating is when you are actually trying to summon a demon and someone comes up with their book and their character sheet and you're like, no, wrong room.
yeah, no, totally. It's if you say you're into role playing and the dungeon mistress will see you now, you might expect a very different experience than what my wife provides to 8 players around the. And that even speaks to what is fun for people. I've said before, I am unironically, unabashedly a fan of the dungeon as an adventure format, and there are a lot of pragmatic reasons for that. Right? It's location based. It's easy to get into. Here's the entrance. Uh, the stuff tends to be packed tightly together, so you don't have to worry about, okay, then do you guys have 27 days of food before you get to the next mountain of power? But the other thing is that it does not speak to any real world experience of myself or any of my friends
Right.
or any of the people we talk to.
Who have
There
barely maybe
is
even gone camping, right? I mean, like,
right, exactly. I mean, it's if we're talking about, when you're saying, hey, this is a game where you go to a school of magic and there are cliques and politics, and I did something that was similar to that. I went to a regular school of cliques and politics. If you're saying, hey, you guys are going to steal from the rich and give to the poor, poverty and wealth and stealing, those are things that I have experience with. If you say, here are 47 levels under a mountain that have a bunch of creatures that are, for some reason, sitting in their own rooms waiting for someone to bother them, at which point there will be no conversation, they'll attack you, and if you succeed, they have a really nice tea set. That does not speak to any real world experience of mine.
not at all.
Um, and I think that's one of the reasons why some things sort of didn't get analyzed until people started to make more realistic versions of that experience. Because if I walk into a room and I'm told there are 5 goblins, they're gathered around a magic tea set, they all shoot bows at you, I feel like that game is telling me these aren't real people. This is not designed to be taken seriously. Roll some dice, enjoy some tactics. It's like playing a game of chess, but with different randomizing rules, and you get to tell us what the name of the knight and the bishop are. But as soon as we say, okay, there's a village of goblins and they live in the highlands and they have very valuable silver mining that they do, and you're going to go burst into their village, kill them all, and take their stuff, you start to think, wait a minute, this is where they live. What? Why are we? What did the goblins do to justify this sort of genocide? And by the way, in the dungeon, I understood that there were just 5 adult goblins standing around. But this is a village. Are there women? Are there children? Are we the bad guys? Those are things that start to come up when you try and make a more realistic world. And I have absolutely gone through the more realistic world phase. I'm not saying that realism is automatically the enemy of light, fluffy fun.
But it's also
But
not a guarantee of depth.
right,
you know, yeah.
totally. So I think it's important to consider, both as a publisher and as a home player, what is the tone, what are the expectations, how far down this rabbit hole of considering what's going on are we going, and if someone is considering the implications more seriously than we are, uh, they're not necessarily in the wrong, right? You can say, hey, it's just a game, but um, role playing is powerful. Taking a role is powerful. These are events that are actually used in serious clinical therapy. And for the most part, we are not clinical therapists.
Right.
So I think it's very important to consider the appropriateness of any adventure, any tone, any subject matter for the people you're playing with.
And if you're going to marinate in this environment for 5 hours in one room, hanging out with each other, or even if you're on a stream and you've got people you don't know that are watching, I just take the time to. It is as much as it is a good and decent human thing to do to make space for different kinds of people. It is also just good business. It's just good planning. It's just good process. It just allows you to get things done without having to relitigate things or litigate for the first time. Pack all that stuff in the front, and then leave the rest for fun.
Yeah,
Awesome. Well, so what's funny about this is it had nothing to do with the topic that we were going to discuss
nothing
today.
whatsoever.
And
But
I warned everybody. You know what I said? I said we'll be talking about what to look forward to in 2022 or something else. Who can say? All right, hold on. And let's see here. Let's see what I definitely want to make sure we get everybody's thoughts here. I think the biggest problem references real thing than realism, and yeah, this book AD&D First, you had an introduction saying how it was based on Asia. It was wrong then, and now I agree. I do agree. I think that there's lines, but that approach and the way that that is discussed has in my lifetime always been not a good thing. So I mean, I'm not sure. I can't speak to when, or what was behind the development of that.
well,
Um,
I mean, a lot of these products were created by people with very similar, in the grand scheme of things, life paths, right? A lot of the early creators were cis white male with some college experience and a long history of reading pulp adventure novels. And I am, for example, a big fan of some versions of Tarzan. I enjoy them greatly. But the original Tarzan book is horrifically racist. And if someone else comes along and they are aware that the origins of Tarzan is horrifically racist, they can say, "Hey, that you are not escaping those tropes by renaming Tarzan Nanzak, and you are playing on the same thing." Same with Oriental Adventures, right? That was not a product that was written by a lot of people with either scholastic levels of understanding of the cultures that were being presented for fun, nor people that were actually from those cultures. And so it became very much, here are some things that we, from one worldview, think look cool and sound cool, and we think we would have fun pretending to be, with no consideration what are we putting out in the world as a way for people to experience this the first time, because how you experience something can very strongly impact how you view it forever. And that's where you start to get into some questions about things like appropriation, right? If I am taking someone's actual history and culture and religion and language and using it for the amusement of a bunch of people that aren't connected to it at all, in a way that is likely to turn their view of it as, here's a shooting gallery of things to kill, here's a bunch of weird religious beliefs to laugh at and to slap on our characters to have a
yeah,
good time in the evening, um, that that is potentially doing real world harm, maintaining stereotypes and building negative experiences. And not only do we at that point obviously be guilty of telling people that have a real connection to this stuff, hey, this isn't for you. You can tell it's not for you because this doesn't speak to your experience with these words and places and ideas and cultures at all. But we also risk creating and perpetrating negative stereotypes that create real harm. And that's a problem. And that's something that I think super early on uh, role playing didn't think about. And I think a lot of sort of commercial capitalist white American and even British entertainment companies just didn't consider. You know, when I was growing up, we played cowboys and Indians. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
we did not think about the fact that if you're playing cowboys and Indians, the cowboys are the good guys and the Indians are the bad guys. And someone comes along who has Aboriginal American ancestry, we're playing a game of, hey, we are better than you because we killed all your ancestors.
right,
And
right.
the fact that we didn't think about it doesn't mean that it was innocent. It just means that we weren't. Unintentional harm is still harm, and I
That's
think
exactly right. I was gonna go ahead.
I think we are still trying to explore these topics as publishers and as a gaming industry and as players and GMs, and certainly myself as a writer, and figure out where are the lines. And I think it's got to be a process. And there are. This is a venue where I talk more than I listen, but there are a number of topics about which I try to listen more than I talk because when my mouth is open, my ears are generally closed.
Yeah, and I think to Alvaro, is that I'm certain I'm mispronouncing that like I do everybody. Like I just learned it's Stan, not Ston. But the discussion about reference versus realism versus representation, which is kind of what we're talking about here, is that there is a certain and this is may make people cringe, but there is a certain colonizer mentality of like looking at the world as a place for me to grab the ideas or just the things I like to do with me. Maybe I'll do something similar, but I'm gonna wear this headdress and I'm gonna go to a concert, or I'm gonna, like there is, I think, real strong appropriation vibes in that kind of an approach. And I agree with you that it's not I don't know that it does anything really great to present important aspects of culture outside of what they're meant to, why they're important, and then just sort of look at it as a canvas for which for me to be an asshole. Like that's just not, I don't know that anybody gets any enrichment out of that. And
And the flip side of that is that we don't want to only present worlds that look the way our own personal backgrounds look.
that's
So
right.
the answer to that needs to be that we need to get lots of people involved. And one of the things I have come to appreciate is that part of the qualification of a writer or a game writer, a developer, is what is their experience and background. That is part of their qualification. And so if I was putting together a group of people to write a role playing game, and I had people who were really good at writing classes, and I had people that were really good at writing skills, and I had no one who was really good at writing adventures, I might well say, well, the next person who applies for a job here, if they are really good at classes but bad at adventures, and someone else is better than them at adventures but not better than them at classes, I've got a class guy. I need an adventure guy. The same can be said of looking at what are our experiences, what are our backgrounds, what are our life histories that we're drawing from. So it is perfectly legit to say, I've got enough people who ape Tolkien and Moorcock in their writing on this team. I need to reach beyond that and find people who have real connections to different kinds of materials so that that different material can be put in my game, potentially from the purely pragmatic reason that if I can present authentic, respectful, interesting presentations of different cultures and different ideas and different traditions as options written by people that truly understand it, then I can create a game that speaks to a broader audience and sell more copies. And that's just good for me from a business point of view.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. So this is very interesting. If folks have some comments or thoughts, you feel free to share them in chat. I want to shift us a little bit, and I want to talk about. Um, so you've done all this work. You've
Yeah.
invested all of this time in preparing everybody, and then the holidays hit, and you've got this span of time between. It can be anywhere from a month to a few days, or maybe you even get together over the holidays. But for many people, there's a block. There's a time when people can't actually um, get together. Uh, how do you pick up the thread between the last time,
Yeah.
with you and me, like even with this program, we took a break. I had to move. We had other things going on, and we took a break. But I know every time I'm with you, we just pick up like we never stopped. So I mean, but not everybody has that magical connection that you and I have.
Well, even then, my answer is going to speak sort of to this episode. You've
Yeah.
noted that we have spent 45 minutes not on our topic. And people are saying it's a great discussion in chat, and that's great. But I think one of the things you need to do is set the expectation that the first time you get back, you are not going to be as closely nailed to the original narrative and getting things done and fall right. Even if you as a group fall into the groove, that groove may spend more time going over your notes than it does moving on to the next encounter. So we, having done this, you and I, we're sort of reminded what it takes to do this, and hopefully we will have a better feel for what we're doing on the 23rd, which is the eve of Christmas Eve. So,
Right.
I think that's far enough before Christmas that we'll go ahead and do a thing. But we'll remember that this is a process, that it doesn't just immediately
Well,
happen
now
starting.
let's be clear about that. Do you think that so generally speaking, and I'm just sharing, we can do this live, why not? It's all
Yeah.
good. But when we are so Green Ronin is off from Chris, well, like between that span of time, right? Are we off or are we on?
Uh
Let me look. Maybe I'm confusing my
and
dates
it's the
because
23rd, right?
I was laughing because I've got a Stan in my box, in my inbox. The
Oh,
23rd. Oh yeah, I guess we are. Yeah, I guess we are. We are on. Okay, good.
yeah.
All right.
So I would say we go the 23rd, and then we won't broadcast on the 30th, because that will be in that Christmas to New Year's.
Right. Maybe I'll go through all of our episodes and do a compilation.
Well, that'd be great if you have the time.
It'd be fun. Yeah.
Goodness knows I wouldn't. But yeah, so I suspect we'll be on the 23rd, then we'll take off the 30th, then we'll be back on the 6th.
So when a marshmallow sword would come in handy.
Yeah, when would a marshmallow sword come in handy?
Let me see here. Very particular times. Hang on one second. I'm going to
I've got my
share
fingers crossed for hot
screen.
cocoa golems, but we'll see.
Oh wow, that's good too. I like that. I like that. Let me get this ready to go. It is adjacent, I would say, to that. But instead of that, it is.
Wait for it.
Wait for it. Wait for it.
Almost there. Peeps, peeps. No, okay, that's hysterical.
I love it. Yeah.
And some
Oh,
people love peeps, and some people hate peeps. So
I
that's a,
hate them.
see.
I get them every year. My mother just delights in getting me, and they come out with weird flavors and all that stuff. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, the only thing peeps are good for is the microwave. It's kind
And
of fun to
folks,
watch.
if you've not thrown a peep in the microwave, first of all, be ready to clean it. But also, YouTube is your friend.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Yeah.
I think if you're getting people together after a long break, I like to try and just build in a buffer, and whether that's we get together a day before and do lunch or watch a movie. Oops, we got an American here. What are peeps?
Oh,
Peeps are holiday themed marshmallow like confections.
covered
Um,
with sugar. Yeah, they kind of started as like an Easter. Oh, well, I got them on
yeah,
Easter. Yeah, then now they've sort of changed and morphed into all the holidays have peeps now, and they're disgusting. They're just gross.
I've got friends who adore peeps, so they can be a very polarizing food.
That is
Um,
true. Like
and
spam.
we're basically out of time.
Holy smokes! And that's how you do it, friends. That's how you do it. Wow, we really are. It's 2:55. Um,
Yeah,
I do
it really
not
is.
I do not regret the deviation because I feel like that conversation, it's just one that needs to happen. And I think that Darren's up a good point that peeps are good for sacrifices and s'mores. Absolutely, yeah.
I have had some success with dark hot cocoa with a peep melted in it. Um,
Okay, all right.
but if your hot cocoa is as sweet as I like my cocoa to start, it will be overly sweet. Um, so, but if you, it's a great way to mellow out really dark chocolate hot flavors. And
It's a
I
great
I
way
haven't
to
tried it in s'mores, but I think it'd be good in s'mores too.
it's a great way to interject like inject some energy into children. Just give them all the peeps and let them eat them, and they will just they'll go
But
bonkers.
not your own children. Only do that to
No.
other people's children.
Yeah, yeah, just for fun. Like over the holidays, just bring just all the peeps to your family and your neighbors and have some fun.
When my niece and nephew were a good deal younger, my sister would send out a warning to everyone that bought them gifts that lived in the same town, uh, that any gift you bring them may end up living at your house for when they visit. So if it beeps and screams and whirs and makes annoying noises, there's a chance it's going to be at your house, not at her house.
That's very nice. And I got a similar. Well, I'm the opposite side of that. My neighbors and I are very close. This whole block, we're just really, and I'm moving, but for Christmas, we all got together, well, as we do for our cookie party, and I
Uh
had
huh.
got all the children musical instruments.
Monster.
Recorders, oh yeah, recorders and tambourines and all kinds of stuff. Here, kids, enjoy. And of course, kids being kids, what they did is they organized and created like an orchestra, and it was great. I was just like, this is not the way this is supposed to work. In any event, we will see you next Monday for Mutants Masterminds Monday. We got some great stuff planned. We have a guest artist has created some very remarkable things that we'll be sharing. Stan, and there are lots of great stores going on at sales, rather, at the store. Jonesy has left the link in the chat. Lots of good stuff, and we're going to be releasing something, I believe today. We'll say tomorrow. By tomorrow, you're going to want to get the the freebie that comes along with our Christmas in December stuff. All of that stuff, all the sales are still going. All of the free items are still there. We'll do a recap, I think, probably Monday or maybe even Thursday when we get together, Owen. But now that we have run the clock to the end, I want to thank everybody for hanging out and talking and sharing your thoughts on these things. And in a world where it can be difficult to kind of know when you're right, just listen to us because we're always right. Right?
No.
No, okay. Well, maybe not. But it was a good conversation nonetheless. We will see you all later. Have a really great rest of your week, and we will check back with you soon. Bye.